Okay, good morning, everybody. Sorry about that, but thank you very much for joining this session, and thank you very much to Tom for having me again at one of his events. But my name is Marc Einstein, and I'm the Chief Analyst for Telecommunication and Digital Services at my company, which is ITR, a Japanese IT research and consulting firm. So I'm talking to you right now from Japan. I'm really happy to be on this panel discussion with my colleague Hideki. And basically what I'm going to do in the first part is I'm just going to talk for no more than 15 minutes and hopefully give you a little bit of an introduction if you're not familiar with Japan's IT market, or maybe an update if you are a little bit familiar with Japan's IT market, because I do think that there's growing interest in partnering with CEE companies. And so I'm just going to run through some quick slides, and I think there's going to be a bit of a discussion. But I'll basically just start off a little bit by explaining what my company is, and that'll kind of give some context to the information that I'm going to show you. But ITR Corporation is, like I said, a Japanese IT research and consulting firm. We've been around since 1994, and we are based in Tokyo. But basically what we do is we write a series of reports on the IT market in Japan, and we're also very involved in direct consulting with the IT market in Japan. And so one of my specific jobs is that I basically work with large Japanese companies like banks and airlines and railroads, manufacturers, and I help them find partners overseas for their IT needs. And so that is really the reason that I would be involved in an event like this. And that's just a very, very quick introduction about who I am and what my company does. But what I really want to share with you all today is I want to talk a little bit about what is going on with the Japanese IT market, because I do think that things are changing. Things were changing a lot before COVID-19 and are certainly probably changed forever. But one of the things that my company does is we track IT spending. And so you can see this is since we started tracking, this is the average percentage change of increase or decrease in IT budget versus what was expected. And so, both of these dark blue lines represent actual spending and the forecast. And if you go back all the way to 2001, when we started this, you can see that IT spending was increasing until 2009, and this was the Lehman shock, and we saw a huge contraction in IT spending in the market. But ever since then, IT spending has been growing in Japan. The themes of digital transformation has been very strong up until now. Of course, with COVID-19, some industries are not doing well. We do think that the growth will be probably flat for 2020 because there are some industries where it's really going to be curtailed, whereas there's actually some industries where we think it's going to be accelerated. So that's kind of the history of Japan's IT spending and kind of what we're expecting for this year. But I think one of the really interesting things about the Japanese market is that we have seen a lot of interest in IoT. And so when we talk about Internet of Things, we did this survey at the end of last year. We talked to 373 of our largest enterprise customers, and 94% of the companies in Japan have introduced some sort of IoT service and will continue to do so. I did the same study in 2018. It was only about 40%. So, this theme of using Internet of Things is a very big topic in Japan. And of course, IoT requires new security, it requires new storage, it requires new software, it requires new hardware. And so overall, we do see the Internet of Things as something which is very much driving digital transformation in Japan. So I think this is very encouraging. And I think this also means for a CEE audience that there is increasing interest in partnering, because a lot of the services that companies want to make are increasingly complex, using things like AI. And I think that the CEE region is increasingly a destination of interest for large Japanese enterprises. So I think basically another thing that we look at when we look at the Internet of Things in Japan is we look at what industries are adopting them. And so I think if you look in Japan specifically, there are some industries where there is a very large emphasis on using IoT services. So, one of the industries in Japan which has really been struggling is logistics. In the logistics industry, only about 3 out of 10 positions for delivery drivers can be filled recently because of labor shortages and things like that. So making logistics smarter is a huge theme in Japan, as is smart manufacturing. So again, labor shortages, automation, all these kinds of things are definitely something that Japan Inc. wants to do. Transportation, the automotive industry being as large as it is, this is always one that's kind of towards the top. But if you go down all the way towards the bottom, I mean, basically every industry in Japan to some extent, be it energy or healthcare or B2C products, are all really interested in using IoT services, and this is creating a lot of opportunities in the Internet of Things market. But I think what I do want to send as a message to an audience in CEE is that there are really socioeconomic factors in Japan that are driving the IT market as well, as opposed to a purely revenue profit perspective. And so there are things that are changing in Japan, and I think that these are opportunities. And I think you might know that Japan's median age is about 50 years old, which is one of the oldest countries in the world. And so there is an increasing need for IT services to care for this population. So that's always something that the Japanese companies are interested in. But again, also this combined with the very low birth rate we have in Japan is creating a massive labor shortage. And I already mentioned logistics, but many industries, from manufacturing, agriculture, retail stores are really struggling to hire people. And so this means that AI and any kind of automation solution is very much in demand here. Post-COVID-19 DX. So one thing that you might not know is that in Japan, up until a few months ago, the theme of work from home was really not seen very well by most Japanese companies, and there was a very large emphasis on working in an office every day, fixed hours, very different from what you'd see in North America or in Europe. But this has really changed. In the last 3 months, all Japanese companies basically have been working from home, and the transformation of work in an office from work from home happened, I would say, fairly smoothly in only a few months. And this is the new normal. And I think a lot of Japanese companies are now looking at this and reevaluating their entire digital transformation strategy, which is including things like security and work from home and all these kinds of things. So I do think that the COVID-19 impact on the IT market has been huge, and I do think it's going to create opportunities. But there's all sorts of things. Aquaculture, Japan makes less than 50% of its food. There is an emphasis to produce more food domestically with the help of technology. Energy. It's been quite a while since the Fukushima reactor disaster, but ever since then, there's been a push towards new types of energy, be it solar or geothermal or wind. So clean energy is still a theme, and then natural disasters. So any kind of IoT solution which can potentially monitor earthquakes and tsunamis are also quite big. And of course, when I mention all these things, I would also include things like the security that you would need to back up these kinds of new solutions. So there are clearly economic factors, but I would also say that there are socioeconomic factors which are really driving the IT market in Japan, which makes Japan a little bit different than a lot of other countries. But looking at where the opportunities are with Central and Eastern Europe and Japan, I think that taking it one step further, population is getting older and the population is decreasing. And this is creating a major labor gap, not only in low skilled positions, but also in middle and higher skilled positions. So, for example, there's a major shortfall of cybersecurity professionals in Japan. And so the government currently predicts that there will be a lack of up to 600,000 IT professionals in Japan in the next 10 years. And what I believe is that this is going to lead to a lot more offshoring. And I do know that the Central and Eastern Europe region is a region that does have a lot of expertise in cybersecurity. So I think this is definitely an excellent area for collaboration. I have clients that are really looking at what to do. I know that Hideki, who's also on this panel with me, also is very involved in this area. So cybersecurity for IT definitely very hot, and I would say even hotter because of COVID and the transition to work from home. AI is another area where I think CEE is fairly strong. And a lot of Japanese companies are trying to introduce AI. And so again, I'm showing you a survey that we did asking Japanese companies why they're leveraging AI. So the number one reason was to reduce errors in manufacturing. So smart manufacturing, again, being a very hot topic, replacing human labor. We've already discussed, but there is also all sorts of reasons. So, make better decisions, get better insights from their data, improve their customer support. So chatbots are becoming a huge thing in Japan, again, because it's just really impossible to staff call centers these days. And, now call centers are considered dangerous, and a lot of coronavirus outbreaks have been linked to call centers, but even making new services and creating new sales. So, again, next to security, I do think that AI is another great area where Central and Eastern European and Japanese companies can increasingly work together. And so I've been in Japan for about 10 years. And to be honest, I think that when I first moved here, there was really, business was very different than it is today. So, really 10 years ago, Japanese companies were going to use, big Japanese IT vendors like Fujitsu or NEC and Hitachi, kind of no matter what, even though it was expensive and probably wasn't the most up-to-date solution that could be found. But as IT companies in Japan, the big ones have become fairly weaker, I definitely think that there has been a more open attitude towards working with startups and also offshoring. And what we've actually seen is that there are several companies from Central and Eastern Europe that have been pretty successful in Japan. You might know this, but the biggest success so far has probably been ESET, the Slovakian IT security vendor. They entered the market 15 years ago. They started working with Canon as a sales channel. And they have about 10% market share for their endpoint security solution, which is a massive number, and a very very successful case, and something I know a lot of other companies would like to emulate. But we're seeing things all over the place. So, for example, Silicon Studio is working in game development. I think game development, looking for bugs. Graphic design for games and also for animation. There's just labor shortages here. And so Japanese companies are looking for, I would say, cost-effective but high-quality services for the game and animation industry. So we're starting to see an uptick in this as well. And then, BPO. So you may have heard of Transcosmos, which is the largest BPO outsourcer in Japan. They have recently entered Poland and Romania in the last few years. And if a Japanese BPO company is moving to CEE, that means it's because their customers ask them to do that. And so that means that there is going to be more investment and there's going to be more opportunities. And so while I do think that Japan and CEE IT collaboration is still fairly small, compared to the APAC region, I do think that there's a shift. There's a lot of outsourcing to Asia Pacific because it's closer, it's similar time zone. But I think that there are issues with quality, is what I hear from my clients. And I think CEE could potentially offer still cost effective, but better quality IT services. And so I do think that the trend is for things to increase. And so, again, I know that was a very quick overview of Japan, but really, I think the hot topics are BPO as Japanese businesses expand into Eastern Europe, cybersecurity, outsourcing for games. 5G services is something I didn't mention, but Japan has live commercial 5G networks as of March. So this is a huge area, as is AR, VR, and MR. And I think any other IT related service that could also help resolve Japanese socioeconomic issues could also be very interesting. And to boot, I think, again, digital transformation in Japan is kind of being revisited as a whole due to the coronavirus pandemic. So that was a very quick run through of what is going on in Japan. And I know that was a little bit short, but I want to keep it a little brief so we can have a panel discussion. But thanks very much for your attention. So Hideki, I'm not sure that if this is being moderated, but do you have any comments about that, or would you like to add, maybe introduce yourself and your experience?
Right. My name is Hideki Ninomiya. I'm from Orient, and my company actually deliver cybersecurity business, also a digital transformation support, especially using offshoring software development. Currently, in Japanese market, most of the large enterprise are actually struggling with the restructuring all the the existing environment from the legacy system to decent one. And most of the largest like a Japanese SI, like a software vendor, cannot deal with that because of a shortage of the engineers and the skills. And the problem in Japanese market is basically the companies does not have a way to assess or evaluate of talent, skill set, or perhaps the capabilities of a delivery. So that's actually causing a big issue. And compare from like a Japanese market to like, let's say, CEE, audience companies, then basically the skill sets, profession is way different from like a Japanese, engineers has, and more like academically trained, I would say. So I think like Japanese companies very much struggling with taking into the emerging technologies from over the world, and that's why that's actually causing unable to real transform it from your old style or the legacy system into the decent one.
So I think what I would ask you, because I know that you yourself were the CTO of a very famous Japanese company.
Right.
I mean, I think what a lot of people in the audience probably want to know is, because I think everybody knows that Japan is very big opportunity and interesting market. But if you are a CEE company, I mean, how would you get started with working in Japan?
Try to find the best like engagement manager who can probably speaking Japanese English, or perhaps how to say, well-trained communicator. Because sometimes Japanese people does not have a capability to speak English mostly, and they are struggling with communicating overseas companies. But some people can do, but they don't have a protocol to communicate well. So if somebody can help communicate between the companies, then those companies from CE audience probably get the opportunity. It's a simple thing, but yeah, it's a huge issue in like a Japanese market.
So I'm curious because I know that you have a lot of a lot of experience in offshoring from Japan, right?
Sure.
And I think you'd maybe agree that historically it's been mostly in Asia, right? So Vietnam, China, India. Do you see CEE being more attractive now? Like, do you see things changing or?
Yeah, it's more attractive, compared to like, let's say like 5 years ago. 5 years ago, like Vietnam, let's say, or the Philippines is the, like a best offshoring places, for like a major Japanese enterprises. But nowadays it's different because, like let's say that IoT or like a 5G or like latest emerging technologies actually came out from like Western world, and people know that. And that's why people try to communicate with the software companies who can actually deliver such stuff, but they don't know how to communicate, or they don't know the service providers. So like myself or a couple of my partners actually trying to introduce the CE companies to like a Japanese market. So it's best to communicate with like I would say like a bridging companies, so that like a CE audience company can easily get into the market.
So I guess what you're saying is that you think that the technology is much more sophisticated than right. Okay. Are there any other opportunities that I didn't talk about that you currently see?
Opportunity meaning like area or focus area?
Yeah, because I know that you work with a lot of companies that are looking for offshoring services. I mean, what's the hot word on the street these days?
Right, except Mark just mentioned, I see like a testing, especially automation testing, quality assurance. That's actually the killer, because like think about it, like let's say 20 years ago, but Japan, like we make a cars, we make so much stuff, as a manufacturing, right? But everyone knows we make really, really good stuff of hardwares. But the problem is, like a Japanese people too much focus on the hardwares and not that strong, on like a software area. That's like a interesting part. They can build, large enterprise, software vendor, Japanese vendors can, actually develop the softwares or produce actually products. But, there's so much issue on evaluating system or, bug fix and then stuff like that. And now, in the last, 3 years, in Japan, there's a 2 software testing company. And those are, getting, bigger and bigger. I would say like a double every year, increasing, the revenue and the stuff. Because, people are, thinking for like such, specified, supporters.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I used to work in the game industry here, and I know that bug checking, even with foreigners in Japan, is still done manually in a lot of cases, which is a big issue.
Yeah.
I know that you're also quite a cybersecurity expert. Do you have any comments on that and how you see the market in Japan right now?
Yeah, like Mark, previously mentioned, like so our government trying to increase the number of cybersecurity engineers, but to me, honestly, it's really impossible to raise the number of a good talent. We need to, depend on not everything, but some part. We need to depend on the offshoring, gaining the support from like a CEE, companies. Otherwise, cybersecurity is not that easy to learn. especially self-educated. It's not something you can, get educated from, academy or something like that. It's really, really depends on the person, the skill or like a motivation who wants to learn. So it's not gonna be like easy to, to raise the number of the engineers. So one day, it's not the far future. It's gonna be the near future. But people need to decide to get the support from like CEE area. Otherwise, we can't get enough service delivery to the market to satisfy like a government needs or large enterprise needs and something like that.
And I talked about the industries that I thought were really hot right now. Do you have a different perspective on that?
You mean like IoT or 5G?
Like the verticals.
Or verticals?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, verticals?
Do you see particular demand coming from automotive or energy?
Like industry?
Yeah.
I would say manufacturing. And telecom. Those two are huge. And banks, they are seeking for a new, like a security technology of sorts. That's a different type. And the other part I can think of is logistics. So they need to comply with all the regulations, right? And then, they need like a new IoT devices or like a temperature sensor, or like a smart logistics systems, as a platform. So there might be opportunity, to demonstrate in Japanese market.
Right. And would you have any other advice for a CE company that wants to get started here? Because I agree with you that finding a partner is critical, and finding a good partner is what ESET did, and that's why they eventually became so successful. But doing business in Japan is a lot more complicated than just finding a partner. So do you have any other opinions as someone that used to be a CTO?
Right. What I can recommend or suggest to like a CE audience to prepare for getting into the Japanese market is like, please get the all case studies which you can show. If you talk about the visions or system architecture, it's not gonna help, because those information is really hard to visualize for like Japanese people. And Japanese people like to feel or think that they can do it, or that's why we can do that, learning from visuals. So I strongly suggest, if you have a successful case in the past working with other companies, it's not have to be like a Japanese company, but if you can something to show as a real case, so that they can digest and see, this is what I'm gonna do. Can you just help us to do it? That's gonna happen. That's very important part. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree that data-driven decision making is very important here. So I guess another topic that I would be really interested in hearing your opinion about is COVID-19, because I think we've seen a pretty amazing transformation over the last few months, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
COVID-19. So that actually, changes how people work, basically, from the remote, or perhaps we can go abroad, but most of the people believe, in the past, they need to go to the office, right? And that was the main purpose to take train and spend the time to get the office. But people just realize we don't need to go there, because people can work from home. But I see so many cyber attack during in the last 2 months, right? And there's so many incident I've actually seen happening in the market. So especially for like a CE audience, if you guys can provide some good secure platform or services enabling to do like a secure remote work, that will work.
Yeah, we might want to, I don't know if the audience knows this, but 7-Eleven, the big convenience store chain, started
Right.
a mobile payment service here, and it was so severely attacked from China that they had to shut it down, like in only a few days, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I mean, the cybersecurity is definitely an area of improvement, and I think we
Right.
agree on
Yeah,
that.
so especially like companies, if you can teach, the key points, this is something that you need to follow. You need to, secure. That's going to be a very important part to, teach like Japanese companies, when you work with, because the people want to know, because some Japanese people don't know, what to do. If you can guide, that's going to be a big help, so that they will ask you, you know what, I have some issue that I need to solve. And then you can start a conversation. Try to, teach something and then get hear their, not only opinion, but have actually issue, so that you can have the key point that you can break into or deep dive on with the potential clients.
And from what you're hearing, do you think that, I mean, is work from home and all this, is it here to stay?
Yeah.
Or are we going to be back in our offices in next year? Or
I would say, this remains the same. People like it, and people didn't know, like this is such efficient way of work. But now people knows it. So I won't say, unless the company say, you know what, we need to get together. We won't have, it's not going to happen again. I think we're going to stick with the new normal.
Yeah,
like you said. Yeah.
I would agree with you. And would you also agree that some companies are completely reevaluating digital transformation overall?
Oh yes, especially like a budget wise, because of the COVID-19, 2 months ago, most of the companies just stop, stand back and think about current budget is good for the future or not, and then they are started evaluating all the budget and its process. And then many companies just realize, you know what, we need to spend the money for not operations or just a simple software development. They just realize, the money has to spend for making a change, like a digital transformation. So from now on, it's gonna be a big difference, you will see in the market.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because in the last few months, the number one client question has been about work from home.
Right.
Number two question is about the VPN, because once they started working at home, they realized it's not secure, and so we got to secure this thing. But I was talking to an oil and gas company in Japan, just yesterday, and they have increased the DX budget by 20%, and 1/5 of the management is now looking at DX.
Right.
And so they're trying to put, and so now all of a sudden they need a wearable system to monitor the safety of all their oil rigs in Japan. And they've just decided this in a month. and now they need a vendor, and no one in Japan can supply it. So they came to me. And I think that there should be many, many cases like this. And so, while the pandemic has been horrible for many people and many things, I do think that it's shown the importance of IT, and I think Japan is kind of waking up, which is really interesting.
Right, that's true. And I see, the same thing happening in the GDPR type of solutions, because, Japanese people don't know. So maybe, CE audience can support. That's a similar stuff, like just you said.
Yeah, I mean, we've even had some questions fairly recently about, what is
Mm,
GDPR, and these are big
right.
companies that are operating in Europe,
Mm,
which that could be very bad for them if they're not compliant.
yep.
So yeah, GDPR is another huge one.
Hmm.
And so I guess, maybe another interesting topic for our audience would be, um, I guess something that people often don't realize is that, Japan has one of the longest business cycles in the world.
Oh yeah.
And I think that patience is definitely required in the beginning, but in my
Uh-huh.
experience, if you build enough trust and you are able to get that one customer, that anchor customer, that
Mm,
you might have a customer for life.
right.
And I mean, do you have any comments about just the overall business environment and business culture here, even though it may be massively changing, but
Mm,
Japan is still Japan.
that's right. That's right. And people wanna try small first. So like so many company might ask you for not real production or like an agile or Scrum activity from the beginning. They will
Mm,
say as a first word, can we try? Meaning that like you know POC I would say
mm.
or BPM, kind of small budget, and you can show like products that actually works or can imagine how it works for them, especially like IoT and like software development, especially for connecting with the like designs or perhaps like a UX, I would say.
So I think that's a really good point. Maybe because I know you've been involved in many, many POCs on both sides of the table.
Hmm.
How does if a CE company comes to Japan and
Mm,
a Japanese client asks for a POC,
right.
how is that maybe different than what you would expect in Europe or North America?
I think method would be the same, but it's a little different. But I can give like a CE audience a good example. The
Mm,
case.
mm,
So when like a company come to Japan, they try to stay like a 2 weeks, and then potential customer actually spend like I would say like a 5 million US dollar to try little tiny output, I would say, and
okay.
the discussion, design and stuff.
Mm,
And after a week or 2 weeks, when the outcome that appeared, to the customer, then they can see, okay, this is something I would like to do, and then
mm,
continue. So we're gonna spend more budget. Then it will
mm,
take like a month or perhaps a half year to get the actual budget to do real production. That's how
mm.
it actually work. So you have to be, little patient from the beginning. Spend a little money and effort. Put the skilled engineer to, you know, to demonstrate that you can do it, right? So that's a very important part, to start with.
And do you think that in the post COVID-19 world, I mean, are Japanese companies going to be 100% comfortable with web meetings and online meetings, or is travel still Japan? Because face to face is still very important, but
Right,
how
right.
much of a new normal is it?
I would say 50%.
Mm,
The people, I would say like a 10 or 20.
mm,
Now it's more comfortable, so 50%. But you know what? If you take in a year or 2 year, that that will change more. you know so more percentage, like I would say like a 70% of the people will be comfortable just doing it over the web conference.
mm,
Mm. That will
okay.
change that. Mm.
Well, Mark and Hideki, I'm joining you guys here, if you're okay with that. I've
Yep.
Yes.
popped myself into this last few minutes, so we got just a couple minutes left.
Hmm.
And just to remind both of you, individually, at 9:15, you need to be back into the Hopin platform, you
Yep.
Marc and Hideki, because you've got
Yep.
your first invitation. So you won't see the
Right.
invitation unless you're in the platform. So
Yes.
that's it. Just so as we wrap up here, any other. You gave us some good advice already, Marc, to Central European companies and Hideki. Do you feel that that's the Central European guys, companies, tech companies, are perceived differently than those perhaps in China, Indonesia, Philippines? And touch on that for a minute.
I'd maybe let Hideki go first.
Okay, maybe if you seek for opportunity in the Asia region, I would say like an English-speaking country would be the best. So especially based on my experience, Philippines and Myanmar, those two, the people speak English. It's more easy to collaborate, and that's differentiate from talking with the different like countries,
Okay.
SoftDev and stuff.
Okay. So one pitch for the Central European guys, really the language is, their English language is extremely superb here throughout, I would say, really very strong. I'm going to cut you guys off and say thank you very much. Keep us on schedule because of the one-on-one meetings especially.
Right.
So thank you guys. Super introduction to Japan. We are now followed by, so Hideki, Marc, thank you very much. We are now followed by Jakub Ratajczak from RGB House, who is a Polish company, has built up a great global operation, but they've also built up a very strong operation in Japan. And he's to a bit of inspiration and a little bit of advice and tips on how to tackle or conquer the Japanese market. And again, before we start with Jakub, one last thing to those who on the one-to-one meetings and on the other side of it. Again, the Central European people who want to meet the other ones, they must invite them inside the Hopin platform, top right, find the person, search for the person's name, start with their last name first, I would suggest. And then the other person should wait for the invitation. You click on the yes, accept video meeting, and you're in. So hope that's going to work well. Now we're right on schedule, so let's go over straight away, if we're ready for that, to Jakub in Tokyo. We're ready for that? Yeah, looks like it. Yes.